Stories of an aircraft builder.
What happened to Olga? Anyone who has followed the stories of an aircraft builder up to this point will have heard in episode 30, Flying, how I got my first airplane, how I got my pilot's license, and how I flew my first demonstration at an air show 2 days after getting my license. That was really great. I have to admit that the trouble that was still a long way off was unimaginable in those days, and I am of course grateful to Peter Jackson in this respect. As a railway man, I would have never been able to do all that. The Olga, my MB308, was stationed in Aalen-Elchingen airfield, where I got my pilot's license and had many wonderful hours there. I regularly took part in flying events, gained flying experience, and obtained my aerobatics license. So I was able to fulfill my wishes, and now I told my Alexandra that it was her turn. What she had always wanted could now be fulfilled. She thought about it for a long time. A horse. That's what she wanted. Good? Then it should be a horse. She looked at a few, but couldn't make up her mind. One day she came to me and said she had given it a lot of thought and was aware of the responsibility of having a horse, and that it would cost her a lot of time, which she would rather spend with me. She then asked if she could do the flying license instead. Of course, why not? And so she trained and managed to fly solo. Unfortunately, she failed at cross-country flights because her sense of direction was not good enough, and she would have loved to fly the Olga herself. So she flew with me. It was a great time. After the collapse in 2012, the question arose as to what to do next. You can't spend money that you don't have or need elsewhere, so Olga was orphaned for a while next to Paul Ehrhardt's Zlin 526 in the hangar in Aalen-Elchingen below the tower. In the meantime, Marvin bravely continued to build his triplane, albeit less and less. In the meantime, he started an apprenticeship and was running on a hamster wheel like most people. However, this enabled him to get his pilot's license, and so the idea was soon born that he should operate the Olga. He was given free rein and was allowed to do whatever he wanted with it as long as he covered the operation cost and potential repairs. It all went really well. Marvin was able to gain flying experience on his own airplane and didn't have to account for it, and the financial burden of the operating cost was taken off my shoulders, and Olga got her well-deserved break. Nothing worse than damage to such a beautiful aircraft just because it stands around. There are of course one or two anecdotes to tell in this context. I would like to use one of these to introduce you to a new friend who came into our lives when we moved to Weschenbeuren. His name is Franz Josef Serafin. However, I have to go into a little more detail here. When we moved into Weschenbeuren, the house had to be renovated first. I did it all myself, bit by bit, and so the first few months passed with a lot of work. In the meantime, all the other things that belong to the collection, as well as the motorcycles that you were briefly introduced to in earlier episodes, had been more or less carelessly put away in the corners. It was time to take care of them. And so, one fine Saturday, I took the time to line up the small two-wheelers in front of my metal shop, which I had only just started to set up, and to clean and tidy them up again. I don't know if you can imagine how the whole situation stressed me out and how averse I became to people. I remember exactly. I was sitting there cleaning one of the motorcycles when a group of people walked past in front of our house. One of them stopped and looked in unabashedly. I saw it out of the corner of my eye and thought to myself, "Don't talk to me, keep walking, you ass." Anyone who knows Ekel Alfred from a German TV show, Ein Herz und eine Seele, one heart and a soul, something like that. Thank goodness, he ran on. His group moved on. I carried on happily and was pleased. Some time later, it must have been about 2 hours later, Alexandra brought me a coffee when the same group walked past again on the way back from their hike. This time in the other direction. And again, Heine stopped and peered in curiously. I pretended not to see him again. I told Alexandra that I hoped he would just keep walking. She told me not to be like that. She was a lovely heart. He didn't stop at looking. He came over and started talking to me. I didn't want anything and kept to myself. I was very dismissive in general. I'm good at that when I want to be. He rambled on about how he also had old two-wheelers, motorbikes and the like, and thought it was all great. I didn't really listen and thought to myself, oh, gossip. I managed to get rid of him. Or so I thought. After my motorcycles were all clean, I took my red little Cadet and parked it in front of the house on the street because my garden hose wasn't long enough for the yard. I washed my car there. Suddenly there was a rattling noise, and Heine actually arrived on an old moped, a 1938 Zünder DBK 200. It was quite a nice motorcycle. He hadn't seen the Opel I was washing before and was now seeing it for the first time. He approached me again, and I talked to him a little less brusquely. He marveled at the car, and now said he also had an old Opel. Yeah, I thought and let him know that I wasn't taking him very seriously. He left, and came back a short time later with an Opel Rekord P2 Coupe. He already had my attention now. He also told me that he enjoyed touring with the old vehicles and told me about a TV documentary in which he had already been featured in camping stories or so on a local broadcasting company. Anyway, we arranged to meet the next day for a short ride with the bikes out around Weschenbolven on the country lanes because my bikes weren't certified at the time. He came with his Zünder and we rattled off. It was a hot day. As I had the slower bike, I rode ahead and will never forget this picture when I turned around and saw the guy sitting on his bike in his shorts, his shirt flapping, open in the wind, his chest hair ruffled by the wind. I've never seen such a cool dude before. The ice was broken, but I remained relatively harsh with him since I wasn't looking for new friends. He wouldn't take no for an answer, and from then on he was always there somehow. It developed into a good friendship, and at some point I didn't want to miss him anymore. As Marvin was building his triplane with me, Franz Josef also joined in, and soon it became a little clique. Then something developed between Marvin and Franz Josef's daughter, which brings me back to the actual anecdote. He occasionally took her with him in the Olga and flew all over the place with her. One day they flew circles over Weschenbolven. Franz and I stood below and watched as they came rattling in. I don't know if it was just our angle of view from below, but it didn't take much for the weathercock of the church spire to come sailing down. Marvin flew the Olga for a few more years. In the meantime, the renovation of the house progressed and the roof also had to be redone. I already told you that I brought a Willis MB back from Friedrichshafen for a guy whom I was supposed to finish building my triplane in exchange. In the meantime, the man fell ill and the pilot's license was revoked, so he agreed to cancel the project. After everything was tied up, there was still enough left to cover the roof. The Jeep was now gone, and I wanted another one. I was able to secure a second one a little later in exchange for my Olga, but we'll go into that in one of the next episodes. I'd like to tell you about that again separately when the story thread gets there. My aim today was to show you how things continued with Olga from 2012 onwards. So be happy, the series continues. In the next episode, I'll explain what happened to my Fokker reproductions. No, they were not seized. And yes, they still belong to me. Wink wink.